wanting to do a video on this for a while, and I'm going to do it now because I've seen a few videos about BITS, calling them all abusive, and just really presenting information in a super biased and inflammatory manner to try and scare people and make it seem like that everyone who uses a bit is abusing their horse. So I just wanted to give some alternative information and point out some biases in the sources that I've seen being used and the lack of sources I've actually seen being used. Because as it stands, we do not have that much information on the damage either of them causes, so you do just have to go off of what you know of equine behavior and how the horse looks, how they're carrying themselves, how their faces look, where their ears are, if their noses are crinkled, how they look, like their eyes, everything. Because of what people know about equine behavior and the signs that horses exhibit when they're in distress or pain, we can look at various horses who are ridden in bits and infer that they are not in pain because of them exhibiting signs of relaxation, stretching down into the bit, ears listening to the rider, flicking forward and back, not pinned back, not tighten the nostrils, or having stressed white eyes, etc. So there's lots of things that you can kind of just tell by looking at the horse if they're in pain or distressed, and there's also signs of distress that can be exhibited by horses in bitless options. I'm going to go furthermore into more detail about some things that were written by one of the prominent figures in the equine science world. It's Dr. Hilary Clayton. She's written a book, probably more than one. The one that I studied in school was Conditioning Sport Horses, and it was about the biomechanics of the horse and how to properly condition them to avoid injury and for different disciplines, etc. That was in my equine exercise physiology class. I've also taken equine behavior, equine marketing, and business management, and equine disease prevention and health. So these are all courses through the University of Guelph, and we actually do look at accredited articles and look into the professionals in the industry that are actually producing viable scientific studies and information on this sort of thing. And the studies that a lot of people use are not ones that you could use in a study for science. Like if I put in the article by Dr. Cook, for example, and tried to make an argument based off of that, I would be told that I had insufficient sources because Dr. Cook is a biased source. Okay, now why is Dr. Cook biased? Well, he is selling one of the main bitless options, which is the cross-under bitless bridle, the Dr. Cook bridle. So obviously he's going to word his arguments in a manner to make it seem like you're going to be the more humane and better horse owner by buying his product. He cannot be taken as a viable source because of his biases. He's trying to market a product. And now you can say he's doing that because he believes his product is more humane, which maybe he does truly believe that. But the fact of the matter is there's lots of people who market things knowing that they may not be better, and they do so because they want to make money. So he is not a viable source. You cannot use Dr. Cook as a real source because of the fact that he's biased. He's trying to market a product. A lot of people's argument against bits is the fact that they're metal, but first things first, not all bits are metal. There's lots of plastic, rubber, leather alternatives that you can use for bits, and lots of people are turning to these types of mouthpieces. But the fact of the matter is a smooth metal mouthpiece really isn't going to be that bad in the right hands, and it's not going to cause pain all the time because you should not be yanking on your horse's face and constantly pulling them back, nor should they always be leaning on the bit and leaning into the bridle and pulling on you. That's not good riding. No matter what you're using, whether or not you're bitless or bitted, that shouldn't be happening because that's creating excess pressure. There should be contact, which is like, imagine you're holding hands. I posted this on my Instagram. You're holding hands with someone. I'm holding hands with myself, so this is not going to be as good of an example, but you're holding hands with someone and you're standing close together enough that your hands have slack in them and you're hanging like this. That would be like riding on a loose contact. Now, if you move farther apart and your arms become like tense like this, you're not actively pulling against each other. You can't feel each other pulling against each other. You're not thrown off balance because of this. You're just holding each other and you're farther apart. That's what a more tight contact would look like, but it wouldn't even be considered tight because neither you or the horse is actively pulling on each other. You can just feel each other being there. It's like holding hands. And that's what a good contact should be. No one should be yanking or pulling because you don't want the horse leaning on you because that's bad. You don't want them being heavy in the bridle. And you don't want to be heavy-handed and having to pull them around the whole time. So ultimately the goal should be to have a nice connected contact but not be pulling against each other. Okay, so and then we also need to discuss the fact that bits horses inherently have the option of relieving the pressure themselves when it builds up to be too much, whereas with bitless they don't. The problem with bits, though, with relieving pressure is that when people use a noseband or a flash that's fitted too tight, this takes away that option from them because the horse cannot open and close their mouth to relieve the pressure. Horses are opening and closing their mouth when the bit pressure gets to be too much. This actually relieves the pressure to the point when you see them doing it, you can actually see the wrinkles in their lips dropping significantly, especially when you see them playing with it, when you have the bit appropriately fitted and you're just standing beside them and can actually see them when they're not moving. It's pretty significant. So now if you use a flash or a noseband that's fitted too tight and they cannot open their mouth at all, then obviously they cannot relieve pressure in that manner. But also, if they're opening and closing their mouth very slightly and just toying with a bit, that doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to relieve pressure. It could just mean that they're trying to play with the bit. But the fact of the matter is they have the option of opening their mouth, provided you have properly fitted your equipment, to relieve the pressure, whereas with bitless they cannot do this. So when the pressure on their nose becomes too much, they just have to be forced to deal with it, which is why a lot of horses may not like bitless options, because there is no relief of pressure and the nose is a very sensitive place. People are ignorant about how sensitive the nose is, and this is a problem because even improperly fitted bridles can cause pain on the horse if they have pressure points along the face because of how many nerves there are running close to the skin. So people just like to get all bothered and uppity about there being something in the mouth because they automatically assume that to be a more sensitive place than the nose, but they don't actually go to look and see how many nerves there are running super close to the skin that could potentially create problems from something as simple as a bridle that doesn't fit perfectly or has a strap that's up too tight and a buckle that's on a nerve. That was actually something my saddle fitter pointed out with my bridle. She said this is a good fit for him where your buckles are because they're avoiding all of these important nerves that could cause him pain and he wouldn't want to relax into the bridle. And she just said, like, if you could move this one up one hole, it would be even better. So that's just something as simple as a buckle on the bridle. Now think if you have something on their nose and you're pulling on them or they're leaning into the bridle constantly and they cannot relieve that pressure because they can't open their mouth. That could be pretty uncomfortable. So facial paralysis can actually occur in horses who have had halter injuries. So this is just from leading in a halter. It could be something as simple as pulling back and having the halter pressed down on them, on their nose or on their poll. Or it could be something like getting their halter caught on something, having someone yank on their face too much, especially if there's a chain over the nose, and stuff like that. So it's safe to assume that bitless bridles realistically could cause the same thing and damage the nerves in a way that could cause facial paralysis. And I'm on the Merck Veterinary Manual. And it says right here, trauma is a common cause of facial paralysis in all species. So if you overuse your bitless bridle and you're rough, much like if you're rough with a bit, you could cause damage to the nerves and cause pain. And facial paralysis could occur from this damage to the nerves. So gasp, bitless bridles can cause harm? Oh my god. Okay, I don't mind me because I do not know how to pronounce some of these scientific names for the nerves. However, there is a nerve that runs right along the jaw, close to the face, like right underneath the skin. And this is where the cross-under bitless bridle would be likely sitting and other bitless options. And this nerve is called the buccal nerve, or buccal. And this is commonly the nerve that would cause unilateral or bilateral paralysis of the lips and nostrils. And I'm going to post a photo of where these nerves lie so that you can get like a visual idea of how many nerves there are running along the face. So the mechanics of a bitless bridle when you're using the leverage to increase the pressure along the face to get the result you want, which would be asking your horse to turn this way or bring their head in, do something, just communicating via the reins. You're using pressure along the face to do this. And the mechanics of bitless bridles increases the pressure along the horse's poll and nose. Both of these are very sensitive areas, as most of you should know if you know horses. Okay, so the soft tissues such as the tongue are better suited to handling pressure than hard tissues like the nasal bone and the palate, which is the roof of the horse's mouth. So this finding would, for bit users, it would hopefully push you to decide to try and use a double broken bit instead of the single jointed ones, because the single jointed ones can tent like this and potentially poke the palate of the mouth. However, like, a lot of people are turning to French link options or Mullen mouse and stuff, so I don't really think that single jointed bits should be a cause of concern for people who are worried about using bit. So Hilary Clayton is the one who conducted this study, and she is quoted as saying, "The horse's tongue can be very sensitive, but it can also withstand a lot of different kinds of pressure." And she said this at a lecture in 2011 at the International Society for Equitation Science Conference, which was held October 26th to 29th. Okay, this is in the Netherlands, so I'm going to completely butcher this. I'm not even going to say it. Just look it up in 2011 and you can look up the name yourself. I'm not going to be able to say the name. But I'm just saying that so you guys know that these are actually real sources. Okay, so and then this is her personal opinion, so this is not a direct source, but this is from research she's done. So she'd be more knowledgeable than, I don't know, like someone on Instagram or YouTube just sharing their opinion without proper sources. So it says, "From my point of view, I would be a lot more concerned about pressure directly on hard tissues and the bones rather than the soft tissues, which have a lot more ability to absorb the forces." This does make sense to me because the soft tissue, like a tongue, would be a lot more forgiving than pressing something directly onto the hard tissue, which would be the nose, which is poorly protected. There's not very much muscle or any sort of padding for the nose, and there's lots of nerves lying closely to the skin, and nerves can be fairly easily damaged. Using radiographs, which are x-rays, and fluoroscopy, real-time radiography, of a horse's head while wearing a bridle and a bit, Clayton evaluated the position of a bit in a horse's mouth with and without tension applied to the reins. When the bit was appropriately adjusted for the size of the horse and adjusted correctly, she said, the tongue could slide up and down and under the mouthpiece. Relaxation of the tongue allowed the bit to sink into the tongue when tension was applied to the reins. But if the center joint of a single-jointed bit, like a basic snaffle, poked forward into the hard palate, this appeared to be uncomfortable for the horse. This so-called nutcracker action could cause the horse to react by leaning into the bit or opening his mouth, Clayton continued. Okay, so that's important. That action would be completely void if you chose a double broken bit, because it physically cannot do that. The mechanics of the bit are changed. So that's a very easy solution to avoid that happening if you still want to use a bit. I think that some of the resistances we see in different bits are actually the horse's way of trying to relieve pressure on the palate. Essentially, she suggested that riders should try to avoid putting pressure on the hard tissues like the palate and jawbones and keep pressure primarily on the tongue. And this can be done pretty easily just by switching up the mechanics of the bit that you're using. And ultimately, you just need to make that decision based upon how your horse rides. If you can ride them really softly without much pressure, then it's probably less of an issue. But there's lots of different options for mouthpieces that could completely change the action in the mouth. Earlier studies done on one type of bitless bridle, on the other hand, showed that the pressure on the nose, under the chin, and on the poll was quite high. Although this research is still in its early stages, she said she isn't convinced that the bitless bridle is more humane. This is really important because there is virtually no proof that it's more humane. So it's just a matter of opinion based off of what you guys are doing and thinking because of where it is in the mouth. But most of you do not seem to have any actual knowledge of the nerves of the face and the mechanics of an actual bit, because all of you seem to think that there are only metal options for bits, which is really false. So clearly you have not done your research. And that is one of the main problems I have, because you're trying to vilify people that are using bits, who love their horses and are using them in a humane manner, when you could be someone who's riding bitless, but doing so with really hard and unsteady hands and causing more damage to them. So ultimately, you need to do your research and truly think about the mechanics of what you're using and how your horse is responding to it. Look for signs of distress, signs of pain. You know your horses, you know what they usually act like, and if someone comes up to you and is like, your horse is exhibiting signs of distress, maybe you should consider thinking about that if their ears are always pinned. And this is important because this is basically what I've been saying a lot. Some people are under the impression that if you take the bit out of the horse's mouth, then you solve a lot of problems, that the bit is the source of pain, she said. I would caution you that taking the bit away and simply putting the pressure on the horse's nose may not be a cure-all. So ultimately what she's saying is you need to do a circumstantial judgment for your own horse and your own riding and what you're using, and really think about what's best for the horse and don't think that ultimately because you change your equipment that you cannot cause pain, because that's ignorant and that sets you up for failure. I think that's important is that if we're riding our horses, we need to make a concerted effort to get them moving in a manner where they can carry our weight the most effectively. And she did parallel research to this study on like the action of bits and bitless bridles, and it was on head and neck problems in riding horses. And this is why bridles and bits, or bitless options if your horse could go well enough in that, are important, because they help riders get their horses into lightness and rounded positions to better support our weight. If your horse is going around at hollow and you're using a halter or nothing at all, and they're super hollow and not carrying themselves correctly, this is going to end up causing harm to their neck and back. Her research on neck lesions showed that neck injuries are very common in riding horses, and this is a result of them not carrying themselves properly in a lot of cases. Another thing from her study, this is not my wording, in order to maintain a neck position required of a discipline, horses must activate the deep stabilizing musculature of the neck to stabilize the individual vertebral joints and avoid micromotion that predisposes to arthritic changes. Core training exercises that focus on moving the neck through a wide range of motion in a variety of directions are the best way to activate and strengthen the deep cervical stabilizing musculature so that the horse can safely perform in different head and neck positions without causing injury. As riders recognize that each horse is different, we will have different reactions to different kinds of tack, and they will be able to better ensure their horse's well-being over both the short and long term. That was Hillary Clayton again. So basically, you need to do what is best for your horse based off of what you know about them. Ultimately, if you tried bitless and your horse will not go properly and they're going hollow and not round and you cannot get them to go properly bitless, you're better off using a bit, because if they're going around hollow and carrying you improperly, you're going to set them up for injury, because it isn't natural to carry a rider. So if they're going to do it, they need to carry themselves in the manner that we have found best helps them to appropriately carry our weight comfortably. And if a bit requires you to do this, then absolutely you should do that. You shouldn't listen to people on the internet who have very few resources and very little knowledge on equine behavior and how to actually determine whether or not a horse is in pain. And they cherry pick these photos of horses with gaping mouths in situations where something probably went wrong that caused them to be that way, because they are in distress in these types of photos. But the fact of the matter is most people riding in bits do not look like that most of the time. So you're causing fear and trying to you're trying to get people all excited and bothered by this by using images that aren't accurately portraying what is really going on in the industry and how most people are using their equipment. Okay, so this is another article, and it's about a French 24-year-old rider named Alizé Fromont. And I don't know if I said that right because I'm not French, but she rode her stallion to music, her Lusitano stallion Mistral du Cousol, in a bitless bridle. This horse has been trained to Grand Prix level with a bit, but 3 months ago she decided it would be fun to try something new. She now trains her 5-year-old horse in a head collar once a week. And this is what she's quoted as saying: "I'm not against bits and bridles, but I usually ride my horses in a snaffle." I would agree with that. You should, in my opinion. "I do all the same things in the head collar and in a snaffle and only put on the double because I'm obliged to use it in competitions." And I think that's fair too. I personally think that they should move to allow people to show in snaffles at a higher level. I do think that should be allowed. And same with bitless options. If people want to show bitless, they should have the option to show bitless in anything. There needs to be choice. But choice is important and knowledge is important. So the bridle that Fromont uses is custom made and the reins are stitched to the noseband. This eliminates the cross-under system, which would increase the pressure on the nose far more. The freestyle that she did was sweet, with lovely half passes and passage. The piaffe was only executed once and lacked impulsion. It was interesting to note that the horse foamed and played with his mouth as if he were wearing a bit. So people who use saying that a foaming mouth is distress caused from the bit are false. The foam, so long as it's not excessive, is due to the relaxation of the jaw, and it causes them to salivate more. My horses sometimes foam when they're lunging or when I'm riding them without a bit. Like Milo, when I'm riding bridles, he'll get a little foam around around the mouth, even without a bit. So it's not related to him being in distress. Okay. When asked if a bitless bridle is kinder and more friendly to the horse, Dr. Hilary Clayton replied, "I approach it scientifically. There is pressure on the nose. We looked at the cross-under bitless bridle and discovered there is twice as much pressure at this noseband on a localized area, so padding in the nosebands is necessary. We need to look at more different types of bridles, but they are not totally benign either. It's a matter of evaluating the horse. Don't just assume you take the bit away and it's more friendly." So this is another rider that was commenting on the use of bitless bridles. Wayne Shannon commented, or Channon, I don't know how to say any of these names, so I could be butchering them, commented that the bitless bridle is fun, but your aids are getting stronger and stronger if you keep riding in it, and it's no longer a pleasure. With a bit, I can get it super light, and then when I put the bitless bridle on, it's very good again. As an operant training method, your strength has to be greater. Some horses don't like riding the double and they prefer to go in a snaffle. I think that's perfectly reasonable. It would be great to have horses that can go in both options. That shows that they're really widely diverse in the types of equipment you can ride them in, and I think that should be everyone's goal. However, I do not think that there's like one that's like much better than the other. You need to determine what is best for your horse and their needs. So I'm going to leave you guys with my personal opinion on bits and what should be used. I think you should use the softest option as possible. May it be a bitless option or a bitted option, because you can have a soft bit that would inflict similar amounts of pressure or less even than bitless options, especially if you're using something like the cross-under type of bitless bridle or a hackamore or a bosal. Those would be more pressure than, let's say, a side pull. And I do think that being able to use bitless and bitted options on your horse, provided they don't have health issues that prevent them from doing both, being able to ride in both, I think that's a very useful skill to have. But ultimately, you should be trying to use the softest option as possible, even if you need to bit up for the time being to do a certain thing and teach your horse not to run through your hands, or until you become stronger and you can appropriately check them back and get them to listen. But ultimately, if you bit up, the ultimate goal should be to bit down. Being able to ride in a soft snaffle, because not all snaffles are soft, first off. When people say snaffle, they automatically think soft a lot of times, but there are lots of very abrasive mouthpieces that you can put in the horse's mouth that will cause more pain and be more severe. Personally, I think that when you're using a bit, I'd rather use something with more leverage than something that has an abrasive mouthpiece, such as a corkscrew or a twisted wire, especially when these bits get thin, because it localizes the pressure on a smaller area, and there's just way more room for causing issues and hurting your horse. And I like the leverage bits because oftentimes, especially if you're riding them with them in two reins, you can choose when to use the added pressure and then mostly work off the snaffle rein when you don't need to add the curb or add the extra pull pressure. So I prefer those over using a tougher mouthpiece personally. Both my horses go in rubber bits. Milo goes in a rubber truss bit. I'll put a photo in. It's really flexible. You can basically bend it completely in half. It's almost completely rubber with like a very thin metal core just so that they can't chew through it. It's literally like a wire in the middle, so he cannot feel the metal. So it's just ironic when people only think bits are metal. And then Archie goes in a plastic or rubber. It's much more plasticky. The plastic Happy Mouth French Link D-ring. So none of these bits would do the nutcracker effect, and both my horses are very happy to work in them. They run to the fence, they're ready to greet me. They're really happy to go to work. They always open their mouths for the bit. They don't show any signs of distress when I'm riding them. Occasionally they'll buck and shoot forward, but it's mostly out of excitement or if they spook, or in times where they're nervous, off property, stuff like that. It's not a sign of pain. I frequently get both of them vetted. I've had the vet out like 5 times this year because I call the vet for everything to check them out. I've had Milo's mouth checked twice and Archie's mouth checked once because I got him after I had the vet out the first time, and both of them are fine and all happy and healthy. So personally, I'm happy with what I'm doing with my horses. I'm happy riding them in a bit. They can both go bitless or bridle-less or bitted, but ultimately they work the best in a bit and work the most properly in a bit, and that's the way I want it. If they can work softly and properly and happily and carrying themselves properly so that they're not going to injure themselves from going hollow and carrying my weight around, I'm happy with that. And telling everyone that they should go bitless no matter what and that they're abusing their horses if they're using a bit is ridiculous. That's like me running around saying that anyone who can't ride their horse bridle-less is an idiot who can't ride. Like, that's just, it's just ridiculous. You need to do your research and think of your own horses and pick what's best for your horse in the particular situation. You can't make generalized assumptions about every single horse out there and all bits. Like if you're saying like something like, oh, I don't like leverage bits because they can be harsh. I've seen this happen or that happen. Or like me, I don't like twisted wire bits because of this. That's more reasonable. But if you're saying all bits, no matter what, are bad and cause pain no matter what, that's ridiculous. You're making a huge generalization off of your own opinion and you're trying to present it as fact, which is wrong. It's important to educate yourself, consider the facial nerves, consider the nerves of the mouth, and consider your own personal horse and what they're showing you with their attitude and their work ethic. And when you change up the options to bitted and bitless, see what they like best and choose. I think bitless needs to be offered in more levels of competition in any and all disciplines. It needs to be more widely accepted, and that should happen. But I don't think that bitless is abusive, and I don't think bitted is abusive. I think riders make it abusive depending on how they use their hands and what options they're choosing to use. So I hope this was educational, and I hope that you guys don't blindly believe anything people say, especially when they have limited or super biased sources. I'm going to leave all the links that I read from down below. And some of the articles that I've been using in the past are only available through a university library, so I cannot post those because you guys won't be able to access them. So I'll post the ones that you can access, and you can find the links from the studies from there. Horse.com is actually a really good site, or sorry, it's thehorse.com. It's a great site because they only accept veterinary articles when they're doing stuff like this. So it's already pre-checked. Like they don't let anyone and their dog write into them. You have to be someone who has a background to kind of back what you're saying. So they're a really good site to look at when you're looking for easy reads that have like all the information condensed in an easy format, which is easier to read than a study. So yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I really hope that this changes some of your guys' view if you've blindly been following what people say and what to do.